Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw the debut of the new horror film Smile from Paramount, which dominated the weekend with $22 million, $6,000 per theater, and a lot of that probably has to do with a pretty unique marketing campaign for this film, in addition to the typical trailers and typical marketing campaigns that most films and most studios use for their films. This one also had the added benefit of some pretty creepy people being featured in different sporting events and other things like it, sporting the very creepy Smile, wearing a Smile t-shirt. So I think that is probably another reason as to why the film is getting as much attention as it is. I've actually heard some pretty good things about the movie. I might check it out myself, but hey, I haven't seen it yet, but the numbers are speaking pretty loudly, and that is that the film is doing very, very well, and based off of its budget, it will break even by next weekend. We also have the second weekend numbers for Don't Worry, Darling, and even though that 62% drop-off is pretty bad, that's a pretty massive drop-off for this Olivia Wilde film, who is just, let's just say, all kinds of fun crazy. We also have to recognize that the movie has made enough opening weekend and this weekend to put it on a projected path to potentially make its money back, depending on just how massive the following drop-offs after this weekend are going to be. So we'll be following that over the course of the next few weeks, especially since in about 2 weeks we have the release of the next and really first major release since, August or even late July, you could even argue, that of Black Adam as far as massive big budget films are concerned. So Don't Worry, Darling still has a couple of weeks to be able to get some of its money back, or at the very least get very close to that. We'll talk about that and look at the actual numbers. We also have some updated numbers for The Woman King, and I have already started to see videos that I warned people about last weekend. I warned people saying, don't get overly excited about the film's prospects at this point based off of the numbers I'm giving you, because, major caveat, the movie has yet to release in a vast amount of countries. We're already starting to see some money coming in from the countries that it has since released in, since its opening day, but it has yet to release in major markets like the UK. The big question, of course, is going to be, are those countries going to buy into the propaganda and support this movie, or are they going to start to wake up? American audiences haven't really seemed to be waking up to this movie yet, and has not woken up yet too, and kind of decided to slam into the face of this film, the crazy propaganda that it's trying to push. But hey, maybe one day people will wake up. We'll have to wait and see. We'll talk about this and plenty of other films in just a few minutes, but before we go any further, please make sure you smash that like button, slap that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So, have no idea if that even just made sense, because notification is always a hard word for me to say in that sentence, but I'm also on Rumble, so smash the Rumble button if you're watching over there. I'm all over the place these days. I'm crazy. So it's kind of a crazy thing. With the live streams now, we're on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, DLive, and now we're on Locals. It's pretty amazing. So if you want to join any of those awesome communities, check out the top link in the video description. But let's talk about the numbers. Smile from Paramount made $22 million at 3,600 screens for a per theater ratio of $6,000, which is a pretty impressive number, especially in comparison to some of the films that we have seen as of late. This film was able to make a little bit of money overseas, putting it in a prime position to make its money back pretty quickly. Coming in the number 2 spot is Don't Worry, Darling from Warner Brothers, the Olivia Wilde movie, which got a lot of controversy surrounding it because of the film itself, comments made about the film itself by the director and by people surrounding the movie. It's just kind of one of these weird films that I think that the drama surrounding the outside and external factors of the movie have gotten more attention than the movie itself, and that seems to be pretty obvious by the fact that it had a very strong opening weekend, or stronger than expected, and now has had a massive drop-off since the movie doesn't seem to be really delivering in any way whatsoever, or at least people are starting to become disinterested in the drama surrounding it. But 62% drop for a film of this caliber, of this budget type, is pretty bad. Like, this is the kind of drop off that you would expect to see from a Marvel film or from a big budget movie, but for a movie that cost in the 20s or 30s as far as the actual budget, $20 to $30 million, that is not good. Not a very good sign. That all being said, and its per theater ratio not being all that great, the fact still remains that it made enough in its opening weekend and is continuing to make enough to where, unless it has a massive falling out and a massive drop-off in the following weeks to the same level or extent or similar levels as we're seeing right now, this film could still end up making its money back and is projected, at least according to historical metrics, to be able to make its money back. There's enough room there, at least at this point. Same also could be said for The Woman King, as though the difference, of course, with this movie is that it is having a very strong performance as far as its holds are concerned. In its third week of release, it made another $7 million, which is a 36% drop or hold from last weekend. So that is a very impressive number. Its domestic number isn't all that high at $46.7 million. Probably looking at this film capping out somewhere between, $75 and $100 million domestic. I think that would be very generous to say it gets to $75 to $100 million, but based on the current tracking and based off of the fact that it's still got 2 weeks before Black Adam has any major competition in any of the films that are out at the box office currently, I would say, and as long as people keep on, buying or ignoring the propaganda for the movie, it seems that the marketing for the film is doing enough to get people to still go out to go see the movie. Add on top of this the fact that it is still yet to release in major countries, and this film still has a little ways to go. Coming in at the 4 spot is Bros. The only thing I can tell you about Bros is that it is a rom-com about gay people. That's how they're marketing the film, and apparently a lot of people aren't really all that interested in it. $4.8 million, not a very good number for this Universal film. It costs a lot more than one would have suspected it to, and probably more than what it should have, and that leads to the conclusion of, depending on where this falls next weekend, we could see this film end up losing a decent amount of money, even though it didn't cost all that much to make. Regardless of that, it is a new release, and hey, maybe you've seen it and maybe it's better than what it's presented as, but I don't know. It just seems to be trying to cater to a certain audience, and it doesn't really seem like people these days necessarily want to be catered to. At least that's just my own observation. Coming in and still in the number 5 spot is the re-release of Avatar, dropping another 55%. I believe this is now, week 3 of its re-release? So even though it has been out, as it says there, 668 because of its original release, for the re-release, it's only been out for about 3 weeks, and so still hanging around $4.6 million, still doing pretty well in a small amount of screens, having a much better per theater ratio than any of the films above, where it is right now for this weekend's domestic numbers is still pretty impressive. And as I've mentioned previously, I do think it's an early indication that we could see some pretty good numbers for Avatar 2. I think 1 or 2 persons in the comment section were saying some things about they think that Avatar 2 is going to be as successful or even more successful than the original. And I'm sorry, I just don't see that, and I don't really see how that could be even possible. The fact that we are in October and we've only had the 1 trailer come out, I would have suspected a lot more marketing and a lot more push from Disney to try to really get this film out and to really get this film in the attention and grabbing the attention of a lot of people. Maybe they're just waiting for November and December for them to have a massive marketing push, and I do think that that's going to have a major factor in how well the sequel to Avatar does at the box office. But as I've mentioned previously, there's a lot of people who liked Avatar originally who are now thinking to themselves, you know what? Looking back to it, it doesn't hold up as much. The story sucks, and I really don't care about this world anymore. Or they're thinking, hey, I hate 3D, and this is going to bring 3D back in a very large way, so I don't want to support this movie. Or you're going to be like me and say, hey, this film always sucked, and I really don't want James Cameron to spend the rest of his career in Pandora making these crappy movies. So, hey, depending on where you are, we can definitely say that there's a lot less audience for this movie nowadays than there was then. I just think that also the worldwide box office in general has been so impacted in various ways that one could also argue that just from a logical perspective, even though obviously I do have a bias against this movie, but even I'm willing to admit that this film is going to be a billion-dollar film at least. The question that I have is it going to get anywhere close to $2 billion, or is it going to, because of potentially, bad story, bad marketing, whatever the heck it might be, could it end up, crapping out and making a lot of money opening weekend, slowly, or rather very quickly dropping off and only making around $1.5 to $1.6 billion. Either way, I think it's going to be either the top or second top film of the year. I think right now Top Gun Maverick has that position pretty strongly, but it is going to be interesting to follow that film as it comes out. Then there's this other movie, which I can't really pronounce all that well, so Ponniyin Selvan Part 1. It looked like it said that had come from a Korean production company, so don't know much about it. Not in a lot of theaters right now, hard to say, but hey, very strong per theater ratio. Barbarian from 20th Century Studios making another $2.8 million in its fourth week of release. So a 42% hold there, not bad at all. I know that someone had mentioned that they had heard the film cost $10 million and not $4 million. I wasn't really finding that. I tend to go to, and I know it's not a reliable source in and of itself, Wikipedia, but they always update those budgets whenever there is a budget available, and they always have multiple links if there are multiple reported budgets. So as of the recording of this video, the film still projected to have cost around $4 million. Either way, making $30 million domestically, $33.1 million as specifically domestically, even if it was based off of a $10 million budget, means this film is still making money and it's making a pretty decent amount of profit compared to its budget. Bullet Train still in the top 10 from Sony Pictures. This film actually getting a higher number than last weekend, going up 32%. In fact, adding 24 screens. Glad to see this film is doing well. This film broke even within the last couple of weeks, so happy to see this film just adding on to its box office. As you can see, it's also crossed the $100 million domestic number there, so that makes me very happy. One of the most entertaining films of the year, so glad to see it happening to a good film. DC Lego Super Pets is also continuing to hang around right now in the number 9 spot, still dropping only 25%. 400 screens dropped for this movie from Warner Brothers, though. It seems like this film is finally starting to lose out on mass amounts of screens, and I think it's all in preparation for the upcoming movie season, getting things kicked off with Black Adam. We're going to start to see some of these films that have been out for a while maybe starting to make room for these bigger films that are going to be coming from certain studios, and I think that obviously with Warner Brothers' involvement with all of these things, I think that in the end, they're going to keep it in some theaters because obviously having 2 DC properties out could try to see that there's some crossover, or they might want to see some crossover. But DC League of Super Pets cost way much more than what it should have cost, and that's the reason why this film is going to end up likely as a box office failure. And then rounding off the top 10, we have Top Gun Maverick, which made $1.2 million after 19 weeks of release. This film is still at over 1,500 screens and is still having very, very strong drops, to only 24% drop, another $1.2 million, now at $713.4 million. Question is it going to be able to make enough to get to $1.5 billion worldwide? It could, but it's hard to say at this point in time. As you also can see, there's some other films being mentioned here. See how they run. Still no budget being reported yet for this movie, so I can't say whether or not it's successful or not. Minions Rise of Gru also continues to add on money, as does Pearl and The Invitation, and Where the Crawdads Sing, which is still incredibly out in theaters, more than what one would think. And we do actually have an update on one of the films that I talked about weeks ago, the film Nope, because let's just say it's on the cusp of breaking even. We finally have some updated numbers, and it could end up indicating a positive sign for this Universal film, though definitely not a major victory by any means. When we look at the worldwide numbers, Smile made $36.5 million. So as you can see, $22 million domestically, $14.5 million internationally, $36.5 in total for a lower budget film. This movie is one weekend away from hitting its break-even point. It's only about $3 million in the red, and this is just after its opening weekend. So hey, there you go. Good job on your marketing. It is working out for you. Don't worry, darling. As I had mentioned, it did see a pretty massive drop-off, and it's still, though, even with that massive drop-off, towards the lower end of its domestic range, so it's still not in danger territory. The big question is going to be week 3, week 4, and right now, the film is projected to either be a very small box office loss, around $5 million or so, or as much as a $13 million box office gain. Either way, it's not going to make all that much money, but whether or not it's a flop or not is going to be dependent on the next few weeks. The Woman King, as I've been talking about, the range on this movie is definitely not in the danger zone at all. 46.7 million domestically, 3.9. So we're starting to see some international numbers get added onto this. But the big caveat that I have to add for anyone who's excited for this film, seemingly not doing as well, is this right here. Notice how this film has yet to release in several countries. Some of them aren't very large markets, Indonesia or India, right? Not well known for massive amounts of money for Western movies. But then you have other places like Germany, the UK, you have places like Spain, you have places like Australia, Hong Kong, you have Mexico as well. You have these other countries that are known as bigger, heavier hitters in the international market where this film has yet to release in. So the question is, Are they going to buy into the propaganda and go to watch this movie, pushing this film's international box office up to the point where it's able to make up for anything it doesn't make domestically, when especially domestically, it's having very strong holds, and it's going to have another 2 weeks of not a lot of other competition or no other major, no big budget films necessarily taking over up until Black Adam. So this film still has some room to grow, still has some room to be able to make its money back. The question is, are they going to do it? And ultimately, is Europe going to show up for this movie or not, is the ultimate question that I have in mind. Right now, it's released, as far as major countries in Europe are concerned, in France, and we'll have to wait and see whether or not they want to support it. Bros, it's a movie. Same people who've made Trainwreck, Bridesmaids, and Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Other than Forgetting Sarah Marshall, you're talking about two movies, other films at the very least, that were not very good. Trainwreck was a train wreck in so many ways. Some people defend Bridesmaids. I think the only funny part about that movie was Melissa McCarthy, and that's when she wasn't very well known, and that was when people were just getting to know her shtick, and everything about her and having the van full of dogs still has me laughing. However, I never want to watch that movie again, so if I'm ever going to want to watch that scene, it's just going to be looking up on YouTube that scene and nothing else, because I don't want to see the rest of the film because it's just not that funny. Bros, I can't imagine whether it is funny or not, especially since it seems to be a romantic comedy that gives you all the feels, as it says. But the main premise, it seems, is that it's a romantic comedy featuring a gay couple. And so, yeah, that might appeal to some people, but as far as general audience is concerned, 4.8 million domestically kind of shows you that, yeah, people want to be entertained and don't want to be, pandered to. It seems to be the case. Avatar is at $2.9 billion. Again, that number not adjusted for inflation. So it's just insane that film made as much as it did. And I know that Avatar 2 will make a lot of money too. I just hope that if it can make even just half of this, that would make me happy, just because I would love to see the audience just get cut in half every single time so that they stop, because James Cameron is wasting some of the greatest years that he could be having as a filmmaker in Pandora. Barbarian at $34.8 million. Some pretty impressive numbers domestically and internationally for this movie. So, hey, film that I've heard some pretty good things about from some people. So, definitely still on my list of potential films to go see in theaters. Bullet Train, one of my favorites of the year, $236.1 million. Glad to see this film doing as well as it is. DC League of Super Pets, getting close to $200 million. I think it has a chance of crossing the $200 million mark internationally, but because of its, $90 million budget, it's still got a little ways to go. It's at 2.1 times its budget. 2.5 is break-even territory, so you would think, hey, it's just got 0.4, but the film has also been out for a very long time, so it is running out of space. Top Gun Maverick at $1.476 billion. Very impressive numbers there. See how they run? $16.3 million. No budget. Can't say anything about it. Minions Rise of Gru, $924 million. We also got the film Pearl at $8.2 million, so a budget of only $1 million means this film is still making millions in net profit. Couple films to update. First off, the film Nope at $169.6 million is still making some money, especially internationally, and as of this recording of the video, it's still in the red, but it's less than $1 million in the red. So this film is on the cusp of being officially a break-even movie. That being said, you're looking at it being what? 1, maybe 2 million in net profit when everything is said and done. So, hey, at least we can say it's not a massive flop, but to say that it's a success is definitely not something that we can say. But the big news that I've waited up until this point to mention, because I just know that the keyboard warriors are out there saying, hey, you didn't even mention this. Well, hey, I did. Jurassic World Dominion, everybody. It officially, all you shill sites saying it crossed $1 billion the previous weekend. Well, according to the actual box office collectors, right, the people that actually crunch the numbers themselves, it hasn't crossed the $1 billion mark until this past weekend, where it now is at $1 billion. Congratulations. Your film still sucks. You were still making, good amounts of money in net profit. You could also still have had a much better result had your film actually been good. But since it was terrible and nostalgia done completely wrong, hey, good job, you're yet another one of the $1 billion films from a bad movie. Going now into the charting, because we like to chart here over on OMB Reviews. As you can see, the $36.5 million for Smile means right now it's $3.6 million in the red. So as you can see, right on the cusp of breaking even. Very happy to see that for this movie. Again, the marketing campaign is the only reason why I have a lot of support for this movie, and I've heard some good things about it too. So, hey, maybe it will actually be a film I want to support because it also happens to be good. But the market campaign, kudos to y'all for that. $17 million budget makes it a $42.5 million movie needing that money to break even. And as you can see, it's going to be easily making that up by next weekend. Bros at $4.8 million cost a little bit more than what one might have expected, $22 million. Its break even is $55 million. At $4.8 million, it's $30 million in the red. I would say the chances of this film breaking even at this point, not looking very good. I imagine that next weekend's drop-off is probably going to be pretty big because no one's talking about this movie. And when no one's talking about your movie, it means that no one's going to see it. And so that means the very few people that saw it this weekend are not going to be there next weekend. And it's just not going to be good. It's just not going to be good. It's going to be, I think, a bloodbath for this movie, ultimately. Could have cost a lot more and could have been a much bigger bloodbath, but a bloodbath nonetheless. Don't Worry, Darling at $54.7 million is currently $19.6 million in the red. But as I said, we can now make some projections on this movie, and it's going to make somewhere between a $5.6 million loss or a $13 million gain. So based on typical historical standards, this film has a good chance, the average of that is $3.7 million in profit. It has the best chance and a good chance of making its money back. The big question is, does the controversy surrounding the film continue to drive people away from it to the point where it is in that financial loss territory and can never recover, or will it be able to somehow hold on just enough to be able to get to its own break-even number? Again, it's not in a terrible position at this point in time, so we'll have to wait and see. The Woman King also, as I mentioned, at $50.6 million. Right now, it's $44 million in the red. Look at that actual percentage compared to its first 2 weeks, though. Right now, its first 2 weeks account for 74% of its entire box office, but with all of those countries yet to have any release, that means that number is going to drop very, very quickly, and it means that this film's chance of getting to $100 million worldwide is something that is much more likely than one might suspect. Apparently, the people a part of the film and a part of the people behind the screen are talking about, or at least there's rumors, Deadline was saying that maybe they're going to start to consider, hey, do we keep this out in theaters longer? Do we try to put it on streaming? Do we try to, do whatever we can to make up for any of the money that we may have potentially lost? But again, I would say that if they just hold on to where they are, they're seeing good drops week to week domestically. I think that the concept of the film is disgusting because of what it does as far as whitewashing the Dahomey kingdom's just, history of enslaving the people around them and chopping off the heads of old people. Yeah, look it up for yourself. Again, just really, really disgusting stuff. And yet they're glorifying the warriors of this movie, all a part of an attempt to try to say, yes, imperialism bad, and European slavery evil, blah blah blah. Let's just ignore and gloss over the Dahomey tribes involvement, rather the Dahomey kingdom's involvement in all of it. And we'll have an internal film version talking about slavery being bad and show you that there's internal strife, even though historically there's no record of that actually happening, just to try to cross our bases or cover our bases, I should say. Regardless of that, it's a movie I hope fails. I want it to fail, but I'm also realistic, and there's still a lot of countries left. Pearl at $8.2 million right now, $3.4 million in the black. So good job on that movie. Brahmastra, again, is a film that's hard to measure because what is the marketing cost for this movie? Since it is an Indian film, it's not going to be the same likely as other films that are made in America, but at the same time as well, it still costs a certain, again, it's hard to say. It's a difficult one to predict. I imagine that it probably will have done just fine domestically, as far as rather for itself internationally, being an Indian film. I'm assuming that it did much better domestically here in the United States than it would have expected it to, or that any other film had done up to that point. So, hey, we'll have to wait and see. Barbarian is at $5.1 million in the black, so continuing to add to its profits. Invitation also adding to its profits as well. We did get a couple of extra numbers for Beast. This film is still $18.8 million in the red, and because it's basically been pulled from all screens, it's not going to make its money back. Bullet Train at $6.6 million in the black. Glad to see this film making some profit. Again, more than doubling what it did in the first 2 weeks of its release. It was a darn good film, and I recommend it very, very highly. $193.2 million for DC Leaves for Pets. Chance of getting to $200 million is pretty likely, but $19 million in the red, I think, is just going to be a bit too much to overcome. As I mentioned with Nope, right now it's at $225,000 in the red. So that's the reason why I suspect that when all is said and done, and when we get the actual numbers for that movie, its break even will have been met, and it'll end up having a small amount of profit as well. Just how much profit does it make is going to depend on that number. Thor: Love and Thunder, again, pretty much stopped making money at this point. Minions: Rise of Gru continues to add to its already very profitable movie. Jurassic World Dominion is finally at $1 billion, and Top Gun Maverick's $1.4 billion puts the film as one of the most impressive films so far of this year and in a very long time, and is still a worthwhile experience if you have not yet seen it. But what are y'all's thoughts about this weekend's box office? Did you see Smile? What were your thoughts about it? What are your thoughts about the Don't Worry Darling, Woman King scenario? Do you think those films are going to end up making their money back? I think Don't Worry Darling has a pretty good chance, unless it sees a massive drop off next weekend. Just like similar to what it saw this weekend. If it just falls off a cliff, then obviously at that point we're going to be looking at a pretty bad scenario. But projections show that its more likely scenario is to make its money back. Woman King also, do you think that people need to start paying attention to the fact that it has a lot of other countries to come out in before talking about it as being a massive failure? I think so, especially when you have to then at the same time ignore that a 36% drop from its second to third week is percentage-wise actually a very, very strong hold. Yes, the number is not as high as I'm sure they would like it to be, but the hold is still impressive nonetheless. Those are just my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, lap that fire button, smash the rumble button. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my locals, Patreon, and Subscribestar members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off with Patreon, Father Luca Illick, Garrett Searles, Joe Horn, Jaimir Ari Hymason, Jeff Toon, Jonathan Carney, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Orange Hat Reviews, who you can check out over on YouTube at the channel with the same name, Rosetta Allen, who also has a YouTube channel called Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, who also has a YouTube channel by the same name. Thank y'all very much, my Patreon supporters. And also for my Subscribestar peeps, Matt317, who you can check out over on Twitch at Matt317, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, my locals members, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, UAB Mad Dog, Mike Jackson for the win, J.H. Schwalbach, and the great lawyer Robert Barnes. Thank you all so very much for your support. If you would like for your name to be shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, please make sure to check out the top link in the video description where you can sign up over on Patreon, Subscribestar, or Locals. You get access to things not only like shoutouts, but also to giveaways of 4Ks and Blu-rays, an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger every single month, and also the Chosen of Valhalla live stream for my Chosen of Valhalla members, which we do once a month, and it is a lot of fun. So all of this and plenty of more content, check out those links in the link tree in that top comment down below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed October to everyone out there. Blessed month of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And as always, God bless.